Good evening. There are three things I would like to discuss with the viewers. First and foremost, I would like to once again acknowledge my South African colleague, as I did in my last video, who said, "I hate your government." Now, at the time when she said that, I wasn't really offended so much as I was shocked, because I didn't see that one coming, especially so soon. But now, it makes perfect sense what she said. Her sentiment is justified. The United States is responsible for many of the wars and social economic problems around the world. I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but that is the simple truth. Now, many people are shocked that Donald Trump won the presidency because everybody thought it would be a runaway victory for Hillary Clinton. Hillary actually did win the popular vote, just like Al Gore did in 2000. But once again, people refused to go out and vote because they were upset that Bernie Sanders didn't win the ticket. And there were others that voted third party despite the two parties, all because they didn't want to vote with the lesser of the two evils. Their rationale makes no sense to me, but that's neither here nor there. I myself am guilty of that. One of my biggest regrets is voting for Ralph Nader in the 2000 election. I was going to vote for Al Gore. I actually liked Al Gore and thought he was far more qualified. But I was a young and impressionable man, and a college professor of mine at the time cajoled me into voting for Nader because he was right that George W. Bush, being the governor of Texas, it was pretty much guaranteed that he was going to win the electoral vote for Texas. Now, George W. Bush also is responsible for ISIS. That leads me to my next point. It's called the Earthworm-Starfish Theory, something I would like to postulate. It's tantamount to the domino theory that somebody coined back during the Vietnam War. The idea that if one country fell to communism, the neighboring country would do the same, that it was contagious. Well, fighting the war on terror is like cutting up an earthworm or a starfish. Most people think that if you bomb all the terrorists, that will be the end of it. But that's not the case. There's also such a thing as collateral damage, spoils. Innocent people get killed in the crossfire. And when they see what the United States government does, they grow full of rage. And then they wind up joining many of the terrorist organizations. Now, all you do is you don't destroy the terrorism. You only create more of them, just as you do whenever you cut up an earthworm. You create more of them. It's also like a starfish. Most people don't know this. Well, they know that whenever you cut off the limb of a starfish, it regenerates. But what most people don't know is when that limb comes off, that limb also regenerates and it becomes a clone of the other starfish, just as ISIS has of Al-Qaeda. There will never ever be peace in the Middle East as long as we keep throwing money to Israel. They're half the problem right there. I've caught hell for this too. I've been accused of anti-Semitism. But the fact of the matter is, the Jews in Israel are doing the exact same thing to the Palestinians that the Germans did to them one time during the Holocaust. Pandora's box was opened when the Balfour Treaty was signed in 1948. Part of Germany's war debt was having to help the British build the Kingdom of Israel. They paid a large chunk of it as their war debt. The British were the ones who implemented the plan. The French were the ones who drew the physical boundaries. They didn't draw cultural boundaries like they should have. But that's neither here nor there. As Samuel Johnson once said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, Al-Qaeda emerged because we actually trained them. Back in 1981, when the Soviets were invading Afghanistan, we actually were fighting for the wrong side. People even advised Reagan that we was fighting for the wrong side. We trained the Afghans through the CIA to chase the Soviets out. And then they wound up in turning around and they became the Taliban, the Islamic regime that overtook the government in Afghanistan, many of whom also joined Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden was trained by the CIA, which was probably the main reason why he was so crafty, other than the fact that he was also one of the wealthiest men in the world. We have not destroyed Al-Qaeda, but only crippled it. The guy in charge of Al-Qaeda now is Ayman al-Zawahiri. He's an Egyptian doctor. Obviously, he's wealthy because he's a doctor, but nowhere near as wealthy as bin Laden was. But in any event, Al-Qaeda can very easily join ISIS, Hamas, or many of the other regimes there and create an even bigger fiasco in the Middle East. The only solution I can think of is to cut off all ties with Israel and to stop building military bases around Saudi Arabia. Part of that would also to be to maybe start making more cars run off alternative energy like the Tesla and whatnot. As long as we're dependent on foreign oil, money will go to terrorist groups. And as long as we keep dropping bombs in the Middle East, there will be more terrorist groups and more terrorist groups created for after them because of all the innocent people killed. Just like cutting up earthworms or cutting the limb off of a starfish, which is why I have postulated the Earthworm-Starfish Theory. We have enough problems here on our own soil, or in America, with all the school shootings, kids going to class, mowing down their classmates, the 40-year-old outdated infrastructure, bridges falling, sewers busting, pipes bursting, roads with potholes, you name it. Several people without health care, obesity, prisons being overcrowded, all the draconian drug laws they have, and even in our backyard with Mexico. We didn't end the drug war by killing Pablo Escobar back in 1993. All we did was make the Colombian drug lords smarter, and what they wound up doing was started smuggling drugs through Mexico into the United States, and somebody much worse than Pablo Escobar by the name of Chapo Guzman arose. I saw a special about him on 60 Minutes. The experts, the terrorist experts who did their homework, said that Chapo Guzman is worse than Pablo Escobar and Al Capone combined. So basically, by the war on drugs, that backs my statement further about the earthworm starfish theory. That when you destroy terrorists, all you do is create more of them because of all the innocent people killed. For every action, there is a reaction. So we, in a sense, are responsible for many terrorist groups being around the world. So my South African colleague who said, I hate your government, I understand now what she meant. It makes perfect sense. You know, we never get involved in any of these skirmishes unless there's some kind of a financial gain towards it. It's all about business. We got involved in the Vietnam War because we saw Vietnam was a country full of resources and thought there was something in it for us. Nobody ever got involved in Rwanda when there was genocide happening there, or in Tibet when China was persecuting the Tibetans. We had more reason to invade there than we did Iraq, but there was oil in Iraq. So, in any event, that just proves my statement further about the earthworm starfish theory. Lastly, I still stand by my statement that compulsory voting should be induced. I know some people don't like it, but you know what? That's just too fucking bad. I didn't like sitting in traffic in Bangkok when I lived there. Bangkok has horrible traffic, but I did it because I had to, because I had to get to work and I had to earn a living. There were days when it took 2 or 3 hours to get home, but I still did it. I can't stand the heat and the humidity in Southeast Asia. The traffic in Saigon isn't much better, but you know what? I have a good job. I have to grin and bear it. I deal with it. I think of all the positive outcomes from my toils, and I realize that it goes to a good cause, as does voting. So, that being said, I hope my message got through, and I hope that my Earthworm-Starfish Theory makes sense to the viewers. Thank you, and have a good night.